Hi there. I would love to review your Carol food evaluation results with you. So I want to give you a little bit of background on why we do this method and then what your results actually mean. So this food evaluation method is based on something called food intolerances. So intolerances are thought to be genetic, meaning they do not change over time. They are with you and passed down through your family line forever. So that's a very different thing compared to sensitivities, which is our typical food test that's out there in the naturopathic world. Those sensitivities are based on an immune reaction. That means that they can change over time. And generally what I see is that food intolerances, because they are at that genetic level, really go to the root of issues that you're having with your health, more so than food sensitivities. Oftentimes, addressing food intolerances can resolve the sensitivity or at least decrease how sensitive you are to that food, which is super cool. That's exactly why I love this method. So why is it important to know your food intolerances? So the intolerances mean that you do not have the enzyme to break down a food group. It's just not in your genetic makeup. And what happens then is that food, because you don't have these enzymes to break it down properly, sits in your gut and it causes irritation. So it ferments in there, it stays in there longer than it should, and it causes irritation, which can cause leaky gut. So leaky gut is where our cell membranes, which are usually tight and like this, they get inflamed, so there's extra water and fluid that get into them, and they start to swell and expand. And when that happens, there are gaps that end up between these cells, and proteins or other substances from our diet that don't usually get through that membrane are allowed to leak into the body. This is where we can get tons and tons of weird and different symptoms in our health caused by foods that we wouldn't really relate to foods because it's not showing up in our digestive tract. These are things like autoimmune disorders, like scleroderma or lupus, thyroid conditions where we've got hyper, or Hashimoto's, fibromyalgia, muscular disorders, nervous system irritability like mood changes, hyper anxiety, adrenal fatigue. We can also have skin issues manifest from GI and food things. So it's really, really important to understand what you actually have the enzymes to break down in your diet and what you don't, so you can start to get to the root of some of these health issues that may or may not seem related to your digestive issues or digestive health. So let's get into your results. So you will always get 3 results from this Carol food intolerance evaluation method. You will get a primary intolerance, which is usually 1 or 2 food groups that you are sensitive to or have an intolerance to, right? You will get a secondary intolerance, which is 2 food groups that you are okay to eat separately, but are a problem if you eat them together, and together usually means within 6 hours of each other. And then you also get a cell salt. So the cell salt is one of 12 mineral complexes that we test for to see which of those mineral complexes you are deficient in. So you have the most trouble digesting and absorbing this mineral complex. So it's ideal to really supplement with that to support yourself in this healing process through learning your food intolerances, getting those foods out of your diet, and just feeling better overall. So in terms of your primary intolerance, that is pretty darn straightforward. Because it is genetic and it doesn't change, this really means you should completely eliminate this from your diet. And as you'll see in the handouts provided, it can be a lot and less straightforward than just that food group, right? Especially if you came back as fruit or potato or dairy, right? Reading through those, you see how integrated into our food supply those foods are compared to other foods. Some are a little bit more straightforward, some are not. So really take your time to read that handout. Go back to it multiple times. You know, you're not going to absorb everything on the first try. That is totally fine. It can be a little overwhelming, but do your best with the first time through. Eliminate the whole food that you see, right? So either all potatoes or whole fruit or dairy or grains or whatever it is. Come back and then read where those additives might be and start refining, you know, taking more of that out. So for your secondary intolerance, my best tip here is to look at the 2 groups of food and decide which one is easiest for you to just eliminate straight up. So This takes out a lot of the complication and confusion that can happen with secondary intolerances, right? Because if we're trying to navigate this, like, well, I ate this, 4 hours ago, does that mean I can eat, grains now because I haven't had dairy in 4 hours, or fruit and sugar, or whatever your combination is, right, that comes up. So especially in the beginning, that is just complicated and overwhelming. So it's really easier just to get rid of one of those foods and keep the other one in your diet. So you just don't have to worry about that interaction at all. I hope that makes sense. So really what we're looking for is removing the primary intolerance or intolerances completely, and then one of those secondaries. And over time, you might be able to adapt and change that secondary around, switch it out, try it out the other way, whatever it is. But at the beginning, just choose one to get rid of it that way. So in terms of importance, the primary intolerance tends to be the biggest deal in our health. So that's the most important one to focus on. So really dial that in when you first get these results. Then move on to working on the secondary. The secondary varies widely. Some people feel this acutely, and other people really don't notice much of it. That's the third part of this test, right? Is that you take things out, and then what you need to do eventually is test them, right? And see your level of reaction. So because these are intolerances, you will react. It just, because you really don't have the enzymes to break it down, right? It just depends on how severely you react. That is worth knowing. It's worth understanding. Hey, is that primary intolerance more of a problem for me than the secondary? Usually that's the case, but not always. And then the question is too, is that secondary intolerance, if I eat those two together, what comes up for me? Is that a totally different symptom picture than the primary? Is it similar to the primary but less intense? Or do I really not have much of a reaction? Can I tolerate these foods once a week? Can I tolerate them once a month? What is my level? That is all for you to figure out and work on. And I am very happy to help guide you through that process as well, because it can be confusing and there's a lot to figure out. But the idea here is that you want to figure out how much these foods affect you, and then you can decide how much you want to integrate these results into your life, right? How much you want these foods in or out of your life. That is totally your decision. The test or the evaluation method just gives you the ability to decide that. Okay, I hope that helped. Feel free to reach out to me with any extra questions, but otherwise, good luck on those food intolerance evaluation results.